They thought the baby bear was gone for good. What the mother did next, no one saw coming. Baffin Bay, a frozen expanse stretching between Baffin Island and the northern coast of Greenland, is one of the coldest, most unforgiving regions in all of Canada. In spring, when thick ice begins to melt and break away, the bay becomes a treacherous place for any living creature. Sheets of ice can crack without warning, frigid undercurrents swirl beneath the surface, and calm skies can turn into blinding snowstorms in a matter of hours. Amid this brutal landscape, a research drone captured a haunting scene. A mother polar bear named Arla, standing motionless on a drifting ice floe. The wind whipped through her ivory white fur, but she didn't move an inch. From above, it became clear she wasn't alone. Right beside her, lying still in a narrow crack in the ice, was the tiny, lifeless body of her cub, Snowy. To the research team, the first images made it painfully clear. Snowy was likely gone, perhaps having slipped into the freezing water while navigating the treacherous ice. No movement. No visible breath. A delicate frost had begun to form over the cub's tiny body. A silent sign it had lain there for some time. According to behavioral theory, a polar bear will abandon its cub if it's no longer viable. In the unforgiving Arctic, there's no room for hesitation. Survival depends on constant hunting, movement, and maintaining body heat. But Arla didn't leave. Instead, she lowered her head and gently touched Snowy's body with her snout. Not to flip it or inspect it, more like she was trying to wake her cub. She inched closer, curled her large body beside her cub, and lay down. No growl. No frantic motion, and just stillness. Arla lying next to her baby, barely moving. Dr. Elaine Carter, a polar wildlife expert watching the live drone feed from a research station over 300 kilometers away, knew immediately this behavior didn't align with any biological playbook. "She's not leaving to hunt," Elaine said through the control room headset, her voice calm but tight. No animal in these conditions can go more than 2 days without eating and survive. But Arla's still here. That means she's choosing. Choosing, that word felt foreign in the context of wild animal behavior. But what they were witnessing on screen was unmistakable. Arla wasn't acting on instinct alone. Each movement had purpose, reaching out, touching, staying close, as if to share warmth. The drone hovered, slowly circling above them. The scene, though stark, was urgent, a large creature trying desperately to keep a smaller one from slipping away. That moment played out on screen for the first 8 hours, with Arla moving no more than 2 meters from where Snowy lay. As the sun dipped just below the horizon, casting a soft Arctic glow over the ice, the drone captured something that left everyone in the control room silent. Arla lifted her head and turned slightly toward the drone, almost as if she knew someone was watching. Her expression wasn't that of a fearsome predator. It was that of a mother, holding on to whatever was left. Ranger Kyle, who was piloting the drone, whispered, "She hasn't accepted it. She's still hoping." But hoping for what? For her cub? For some miracle? Or was this simply a primal reaction to loss? No one could say for sure, but what they did know was this. Arla was defying what they had always believed, that wild instincts trump emotion, that animals don't remember, don't hope. Yet here she was, still, refusing to move, and with every passing hour, her own chances of survival slipped away. Still, she stayed. The drone zoomed in. Snowy's tiny body was now partially buried in snow, but one small paw remained visible, resting gently against Arla's chest. In the howling wind of the Arctic, there was something unspeakably quiet. Not the silence of death, but of waiting, a waiting whose end no one could predict. following the haunting images that left the entire research station in silence. The hours that followed brought little visible change, but the significance didn't lie in what Arla did. It lay in what she didn't do. In the Arctic, where body heat drains by the minute, a mother polar bear not leaving to hunt for 4 straight days is virtually unheard of. Polar bears are apex predators, dependent on hunting seals to sustain their massive energy needs. No food means rapid weakness, especially for a mother bear with a cub to raise. But Arla defied that instinct. The drone recorded her curled beside Snowy, her body slightly arched like a windbreak. The northern winds howled through cracks in the ice, but Arla held her ground. No searching for shelter. No marking territory. No signs of a hunt. At times, she would tilt her head and nudge the cub gently with her nose, not in curiosity, but with the tenderness of a mother trying to wake her child on a bitter morning. A touch, then stillness. A pause, then another nudge. During the second hour of surveillance, the entire research team remained silent. The only consistent data recorded were 2 words: no change. Yet Arla's stillness, her small, repeated gestures, carried a weight words couldn't express. Dr. Elaine Carter, recording timestamps and behavioral notes, murmured more to herself than to the team. She's mourning, but she's also not letting go. In Canada, particularly in the north, the relationship between humans and nature goes beyond biology. It's about understanding and honoring behaviors that science alone can't always define. Dr. Carter, who grew up in the Yukon, had heard stories of indigenous peoples and their reverence for wild animals, not out of fear, but recognition. Recognition that nature, too, feels. And now, right in front of her, was living proof of that truth. Ranger Kyle, piloting the drone, decided to lower it slightly, close enough for clarity, but far enough not to disturb Arla. The feed sharpened. Every strand of her wind-blown fur, every faint puff of breath from her nose became visible. "She's weakening," Kyle reported. "The way she's curled, her head down on Snowy's chest, it's like she's trying to share warmth both ways." The drone also picked up that the snow around them had compacted, either from her weight or from days of slow, repeated movement. It suggested something profound. Arla might be shaping a temporary shelter for her cub against the merciless ice and wind. By the 3rd day, signs of exhaustion grew more obvious. Arla moved sluggishly, her limbs heavy as she tried to shift positions. Still, she didn't give in. Despite the brutal cold and lack of food, she kept pressing her chest and belly against Snowy, where her own heart and lungs were closest. It wasn't just closeness, it was the only way she could still offer warmth. No one dared turn off the cameras, not even during meal times. Something had shifted within the team. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It had become a space for reflection. Was this still instinct? Or had it become something else entirely, something like love? On the 4th day, Arla began to tremble, partly from fatigue, partly from the wind, which was picking up, a sure sign a snowstorm would arrive within 12 hours. Dr. Carter recommended overnight monitoring, even if it meant pushing the drone beyond safe battery and temperature limits. When a mother bear refuses to eat, refuses to leave, refuses to accept her cub's death, that's not just animal behavior anymore, she said. That's a story. And the team understood. They weren't just observing a natural event. They were witnessing a journey, one between instinct and faith, between loss and the slimmest hope. On the 4th night, the wind began to rise. Gale-force gusts whipped across the ice, forcing the drone to climb higher to avoid damage. The images blurred with snow, yet Arla's figure remained visible in the blinding white. She hadn't moved. In that moment, the tension didn't stem from action. It came from the sheer persistence of inaction. Everything around her screamed for surrender, yet Arla still hadn't let go. And as if to prove that love can transcend even the harshest forces, she rested her snout on Snowy again for what must have been the 100th time. But this time, she held it there longer. The wind howled louder by the hour, shrieking through cracks in the ice. The sky turned a leaden gray, signaling a blizzard fast approaching. The drone began to register interference, its battery draining faster than expected as the temperature plunged below -35°C. Dr. Carter stared at the screen, the image flickering through static. She said nothing, but Kyle's voice broke the silence in her headset. "We're going to lose the feed soon." She only nodded, quietly thinking to herself, as long as she's still there in the morning. At 9:43 p.m., the feed cut out completely. The wind had exceeded the drone's safe operating threshold. The fly cam was recalled, carrying with it the final image. Arla still beside Snowy, her body curled around the cub like a white cocoon of protection, her head resting on the frozen snow. The next 12 hours passed in restless silence. No one at the research station slept. They didn't take shifts. In a place where everything was usually measured in data and statistics, they now found themselves caught in a different kind of worry, one that couldn't be quantified. Was she still alive? Had the ice cracked in the night? Was Snowy really gone? At dawn on the 5th day, with the storm retreating east, the drone was relaunched under emergency conditions. Battery was down to 40%, but the team agreed to risk it. The first image that came through the snow-frosted lens stopped everyone cold. Arla was still there, but now she was trembling, her fur matted with ice and snow, her nose reddened from frostbite, clear signs of severe exhaustion. She was no longer lying still. She was digging. The drone zoomed in. With her front paw, Arla was gently scraping away the snow around Snowy's body, lifting it ever so carefully out of the frost. It wasn't the gesture of letting go. It was something else. It was deliberate, delicate, like someone preparing for a final goodbye. "What's she doing?" Kyle whispered, his voice tight. Dr. Carter didn't answer at first. After a long pause, she spoke softly, almost afraid to be wrong. "She's lifting him, above the snow, maybe to keep him from sinking into the ice." Then she added, barely audible, "Or maybe she still believes there's hope." And in that very moment, Arla leaned in. She pressed her chest and belly against Snowy's small frame, closer than ever before. Her claws curled, not to shield herself, but to form an embrace. The drone captured it. A breathtaking moment, a mother pouring the last of her warmth into a child the world had already declared lost. Silence filled the control room for minutes. No one looked away. It felt like if they blinked, the miracle might vanish. Kyle murmured, "Is she mourning? Or does she know something?" Dr. Carter turned to him, her eyes fierce with clarity. "She's doing both. She's grieving, but she's also still hoping." Day 6 began with a faint golden light reflecting off the mist of Baffin Bay. Visibility improved. The drone, now equipped with extended batteries and a heating module, was ready for routine monitoring, but nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to see. At 8:12 a.m., a researcher shouted across the room, "Wait! Something just moved!" The drone spun back. Snowy's right paw had twitched. At first, they assumed it was a post-mortem reflex, a common muscle spasm after death. But no, it happened again. And this time, Snowy's eyes fluttered open. Dr. Carter stood up so fast her chair fell over. "Freeze frame! Zoom all the way in!" Everyone held their breath. On the screen, the cub's tiny, frost-bitten eyes, dry and dim from days in the cold, were slowly, unmistakably opening. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Then someone whispered, trembling, "He's alive." That single sentence, "He's alive," rang through the tiny Arctic control room like a bell in the stillness. No one moved. No one spoke. Only the drone footage replayed silently. Snowy had just stirred, one eye slowly blinking open. Dr. Carter stood frozen. It was impossible to read her expression. Shock, joy, reverence, perhaps all of it. After a long beat, she reached for the internal radio and gave a quiet but firm command. "Prepare for field contact." Rescue chopper ready in 30 minutes. Outside the station, a Nunavut rescue team had been on standby for days in case the ice fractured. But this wasn't a routine field response anymore. This wasn't about data. This was about something far more human. Though the drone was still capturing footage, every person in the room understood. Approaching a polar bear, mother guarding her cub could be extremely dangerous. Yet what held them back wasn't the risk. It was respect. "We can't just fly in, drop a rope and haul the cub away," Carter said. "She's been there for 6 days. If we misstep, she might not understand." As someone who'd worked closely with Inuit communities across northern Canada, she knew interventions in nature had to be made with reverence. Not just scientific care, but spiritual awareness. Among the Inuit, every living being carries a spirit, and their behaviors can bear meaning. When the helicopter descended, white snow swirled across the camera feed. Everyone held their breath. Less than 10 meters from the ice, Arla appeared, lifting her head to look directly at the aircraft. The most astonishing thing? She didn't flee. She didn't roar or lunge. She simply stood there, towering and steady, her breath fogging in the frozen air. Her gaze wasn't wild. It was watchful. Dr. Carter made the decision. She would go down first. Dressed in a polar-rated scientific suit, she removed her hood, took off her snow goggles, and bowed slightly toward Arla. A small gesture, but in that context, it carried deep cultural meaning. "This is how the Inuit greet a sacred being," she whispered into her comms. "I don't expect her to understand, but I believe she can feel it." The air between human and animal grew eerily still. Arla didn't move forward. She simply took a few steps back, never taking her eyes off Snowy. That was all the rescue team needed to know. She was giving them permission. 2 responders approached slowly, deliberately. A thermal pad was placed gently on the ice. Snowy's tiny frame was lifted, fragile, soft, as if held together by the last thread of life. His body temperature read just 28 degrees Celsius, well below survival levels for a cub. But his heart was still beating. His lungs still drew faint, shallow breaths. "He's alive because of her," the accompanying biologist murmured, eyes locked on Arla. The truth was, with no thick fur or insulating fat, Snowy shouldn't have survived even 12 hours in that weather. But Arla had kept him pressed to her body for 6 straight days and nights, a living heater, sacrificing herself to keep him warm. As the helicopter lifted off with Snowy secured in a heated chamber, Arla stood below, watching. And in the roar of the engines, the drone caught her gaze once more. Silent but deeply knowing. Then, the unimaginable. Instead of retreating, Arla turned and ran after the helicopter. Not in aggression, not to attack, but as if to say, "My cub won't go alone." After several moments of stunned silence, Dr. Carter said the only words that felt right. "We're taking her with us." At first, the idea was met with hesitation. She was a wild polar bear. You don't put that in a confined aircraft. But the rescue team had prepared for far more dangerous scenarios. And as Arla trotted beside the chopper with unwavering resolve, they opened the rear cargo hatch. She climbed aboard without pause. A simple act, but as profound as any ritual. She trusted them, and she was going with her child. At the Nunavut Wildlife Recovery Center, the images went live nationwide. Snowy was placed under round-the-clock care, receiving fluids, warmth, and constant monitoring. Arla was housed in a separate but adjacent enclosure, where she could see her cub 24/7. For the first 3 days, Snowy was too weak to nurse. But on the 4th day, when Arla gently nudged her head through a narrow slot between the enclosures, Snowy dragged himself toward her, and for the first time in over a week, he began to nurse. That image swept across social media in Canada and around the world. She didn't give up because she knew he was still alive. This isn't just a bear. This is a symbol of life. A mother's love is stronger than death. What had begun as a biological observation had now become something else entirely, a symbol of hope, of belief that transcends science. In a world ruled by data and definitions, Arla had shown that some truths don't need proving, they just need to be felt. The atmosphere inside the Nunavut Center in the days following the rescue was thick with quiet emotion. Outside, snow and ice. Inside, a hush, not of tension, but of anticipation. Snowy, the cub once presumed dead, lay inside a custom incubator. A warming light glowed softly overhead. Fluids were administered slowly, drop by drop into his veins. His heart beat faintly but steadily. His body temperature climbed hour by hour. Nearby, through a clear plexiglass partition, Arla never took her eyes off him. Every tiny movement from Snowy drew a reaction from her, a tilt of the head, a crouch, or a light pawing at the floor. It wasn't anxiety. It was instinct. On the 3rd day, a vet technician brought in a soft blanket Arla had used during intake, still carrying her scent. They placed it near Snowy. Within minutes, he stirred and, for the first time, raised his head to drink from a bottle. The internal cameras caught the moment. Outside the room, the medical team didn't cheer. They stood in silence, many placing hands over their hearts, not in response to data, but because they had been deeply moved. On day 5, Arla was transferred to a larger, simulated natural habitat under careful supervision. Real snow was brought in, temperatures were lowered, the space was wide, quiet, untouched by human scent. When the door opened, Snowy, though slow, immediately made his way to his mother. Arla, for the first time since arriving, lowered her head gently onto his back. No growling, no pulling, just a touch. Though she tolerated limited interaction in the medical setting, Arla maintained a respectful distance from humans. Anyone who approached too closely to Snowy met her wary gaze. Not hostile, but unmistakably protective. Dr. Carter said in a short interview, "That's not wildness, that's loyalty, to the role of being a mother." She paused, then added, "She doesn't need our thanks, but if I could, I'd thank her for reminding us that survival isn't always about fighting. Sometimes it's about waiting, hoping, and loving." 2 weeks after the event, the international press picked up the story. Images of Snowy nestled in Arla's arms circulated across platforms. Headlines everywhere referred to Arla by an unofficial title, "The Mother Who Waited." On conservation forums and scientific journals, her story sparked heated discussion. Some labeled her behavior as anomalous, others called it instinct, but most agreed. Arla had done something few, if any, could say with certainty they would have done in her place. 3 weeks into care, the research team made the decision they had all quietly hoped for. Arla and Snowy would be returned to the wild. The chosen release site was Ellesmere Island, one of Canada's most remote and untouched regions. Few humans ever set foot there. Its pristine Arctic environment mirrored what nature looked like thousands of years ago. Reintroducing polar bears into the wild requires meticulous planning. But this time, it wasn't just a biological operation. It was a symbolic act, a gesture of trust between humanity and the natural world. A promise. We won't stop you from being who you were meant to be. On the day Arla and Snowy were released, the sky over Ellesmere Island was a rare, brilliant blue. The transport team moved in complete silence, no roaring engines, no shouted commands, only the wind, and two beings who had once stood at the edge of life and death, now walking together onto the soft Arctic ice. Arla stepped out first, then turned to look at Snowy. He followed slowly, his legs still shaky but steadier than ever before. The flycam captured their journey from above in sweeping, silent grace. Then, just a few steps out, Snowy paused. He turned his head upward, toward the hovering camera. Just 1 second. But in that fleeting glance, those young, deep brown eyes set against the vast white of the Arctic, there seemed to be a quiet whisper. "Thank you for believing in my mother." The drone held its final shot. A mother and her cub walking farther into the endless white. No harnesses, no tracking gear, no one leading the way. But it was clear they knew exactly where they were going. There are things science can't explain. There are actions that go beyond instinct. Arla didn't just survive. She loved, she waited, she protected. And in doing so, she brought the entire world to silence. If the story of Arla and Snowy touched your heart, share this video so more people can witness the extraordinary power of a mother's love in the wild. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next incredible journey.